There was no warning sign. There was no distant howl or omen in Alaska's frozen sky, only silence, that dense and unnatural silence that falls over the tundra when something is hunting, something big, something hungry, something that had traveled 150 kilometers, following the smell of desperation that only a winter without prey can create. It was January 15th, 2023. It was 11:47 at night. And in an isolated mansion 40 kilometers north of Denali, Alaska, Marcus Ashford had just woken up, not from a noise, from the total absence of it. Because after living 5 years in Alaska, after building a life here, fleeing from another that had crumbled, he'd learned that when owls stop calling and foxes stop screeching and even the wind seems to hold its breath, it's because predators are near. Predators that even other predators respect enough to hide. He got up from the king-size bed in his second-floor bedroom. The house was absurdly large for a man alone. 4,000 square meters of cedar wood and glass, designed by a Seattle architect who had never experienced a real Alaska winter. Radiant heating in the floors, 10-foot stone fireplace, panoramic windows offering views of mountains that seemed painted by a melancholy god. Marcus had paid $3,200,000 for this property. Money he'd earned selling a fintech startup in San Francisco in 2018. 58 years old, divorced, no children who wanted to talk to him. Absent father who had prioritized meetings over school recitals for 20 years until his wife finally said enough and his 2 adult daughters said the same. He'd come to Alaska looking for something, redemption maybe, or at least enough physical distance from his mistakes to be able to breathe without every inhalation hurting. He walked barefoot to the window. The cold from the glass radiated toward him, even through the triple thermal panel. Minus 22 degrees Celsius outside. Accumulated snow reached 5 feet in some areas. The full moon illuminated the landscape, turning it into a world of brilliant silver and absolute black shadows. And there, at the edge of the spruce forest marking the northern boundary of his property, he saw the eyes. There weren't 10 pairs. He'd counted packs of 10 wolves before from this same window. There weren't 20. Even 20 was manageable with the dogs he had. There weren't 30. Marcus felt his stomach sink as his eyes adjusted to the distance and he began to count. There weren't 35. There were 40. 40 pairs of eyes gleaming yellow-green under the moonlight. 80 eyes. 40 mouths. 40 sets of fangs designed by millions of years of evolution to tear flesh from bone. An impossible pack. A pack that shouldn't exist, because Alaska wolves normally operate in groups of 6 to 12. A pack of 40 meant something terrible. It meant multiple packs had been forced to merge out of desperation. It meant winter had been so brutal that traditional prey had disappeared or migrated. It meant these wolves weren't simply hungry, they were on the edge of starvation. And a predator dying of hunger is the most dangerous of all because it no longer has anything to lose. Marcus ran downstairs. His bare feet hit the polished wood. He grabbed his Winchester rifle from the hallway closet. Model 70 he'd bought in Anchorage. 12 bullets. 12 bullets against 40 wolves was a cruel mathematical joke, but it was all he had. His satellite phone was charging in the kitchen. He grabbed it. He tried to dial the Alaska Fish and Wildlife Service. No signal. The snowstorm from 3 days ago had knocked down something somewhere. He was completely isolated. No help, no communication. Just him, 12 bullets, and the 9 dogs sleeping on his enclosed and heated back porch. 9 dogs that weren't normal dogs. 9 dogs Marcus had rescued specifically because no one else wanted them, because they were too old or too big or too aggressive or too damaged. Street dogs, discarded, forgotten, exactly like Marcus had felt when he arrived in Alaska 5 years ago. The leader of his pack was called Lobo, and yes, Marcus was aware of the name's irony. He was an 8-year-old wolf-malamute hybrid, weighing 68 kilos. He'd found him chained behind a gas station in Fairbanks 4 years ago. The previous owner had bought him as a puppy, thinking it would be cool to have a half-wolf dog. But when Lobo turned 2 and became too strong and too independent and too much like his wild heritage, the owner chained him outside and basically forgot him. Marcus paid $500 for him, not because Lobo was worth that, but because he wanted that idiot to feel like he was losing something. Next to Lobo slept Oso, pure Malamute, 7 years old, 72 kilos, with dark brown fur that gave him his name. They rescued him from an illegal breeding operation that was shut down. He'd spent his first 4 years in a 6 by 10-foot cage. When Marcus adopted him, Oso didn't know how to play, didn't know how to run freely. He'd had to teach him the world was bigger than a cage. There was Sombra, 6-year-old black German shepherd, 60 kilos, former Anchorage police dog who developed fear of gunfire after a shooting where his handler died. The department was going to euthanize him because a police dog afraid of guns is useless. Marcus adopted him and gave him a different job, not protecting against criminals, protecting against bears that occasionally wandered his property. There were 2 brothers, Yukon and Denali, both 5-year-old Siberian Huskies, 58 kilos each. They'd been sled dogs who became too old to compete at 4 years. In the sled racing world, 5 years is old. Their owners were going to abandon them in the forest to fend for themselves. Marcus heard about them at a bar and drove 3 hours to pick them up. There was Aurora, only female, 4-year-old husky, 52 kilos, with heterochromia, 1 blue eye, 1 brown. Breeders consider this a defect. You can't sell a dog with mismatched eyes for good price. She'd been returned 3 times to different shelters, too energetic, too vocal, too difficult. Marcus saw in her what others called defects and called it personality. There was Tank, 6-year-old American Akita, 70 kilos of pure muscle. He'd been used in illegal dogfights in Juneau. When police shut down the operation, Tank had scars all over his body, broken teeth, left ear half torn off. The shelter said he was too aggressive to be adopted. They recommended euthanasia. Marcus said no. He took Tank home and taught him not all humans hurt, that not all dogs are enemies, that something called peace existed. There was Phantasma, 7-year-old white Samoyed, 60 kilos, with fur that made him look like a walking cloud. He'd belonged to an elderly couple who died in a car accident. He had no family, nowhere to go. The shelter had him for 8 months. No one wanted a 7-year-old dog needing daily brushing. Marcus did, and finally there was Lobo Dos. Yes, Marcus had named 2 dogs Lobo. The first was Lobo, the second was Lobo Dos. He was a 3-year-old Siberian husky, 55 kilos, with silver-grey fur and attitude suggesting he thought he was much bigger than he really was. He'd been abandoned on a highway. Someone literally pushed him out of a moving car. Lobo Dos survived with a broken leg. Marcus paid $2,000 in veterinary surgery to fix it. The vet said he was crazy spending that much on a stray dog. Marcus said money is just paper if you don't use it for something that matters. These were the 9 dogs society had discarded, 9 dogs others had considered broken or too old or too problematic or too expensive to fix. Marcus had chosen them specifically for those reasons, because he too was discarded. Too old to start over according to his daughters, too damaged to love according to his ex-wife, too late to matter according to himself most days. But these 9 dogs didn't see him that way. To them, Marcus was the one who had saved them, who had given them warmth when they were cold, food when they were hungry, love when the world had stopped loving them. And that loyalty, that silent gratitude existing between rescuer and rescued, was stronger than any bond money could buy or perfect genetics could create. Marcus went out to the back porch. The 9 dogs were already awake, because they too had felt the silence. Lobo, the hybrid leader, was first to approach. He smelled Marcus. He detected his fear, and in his eyes, those eyes carrying wild wolf blood, Marcus saw something that reassured him more than 12 bullets ever could. He saw certainty. He saw readiness. He saw will. As if Lobo was saying, "It's okay. This is what we were born for, what you trained us for without knowing. Let us do what we do best. The 40 wolves began to move, not running, walking. With coordination speaking of ancient intelligence, they divided into 4 groups, 10 to the north approaching directly, 10 to the south flanking, 10 to the east, 10 to the west. It was a perfect pincer maneuver, completely surrounding the property, cutting escape routes, a hunting tactic wolves have perfected for hundreds of thousands of years. Marcus saw it all from his elevated position on the porch, and he knew 12 bullets wouldn't be enough. But 9 dogs who knew what it was to fight for their lives might be. It was 11:52 at night when the first howl came. It wasn't a solitary howl. It was 40 voices rising in unison in a symphony of hunger and determination that made every hair on Marcus's body stand up. It was a primitive sound, a sound humans had feared since they lived in caves, the sound of the pack. The 9 dogs didn't respond with barks. They responded with action. Lobo organized the defense without anyone telling him. He sent Yukon and Denali east, Aurora and Sombra west. Tank and Oso would cover the south. He, Phantasma and Lobo Dos would defend the north. It was instinct. It was hard life experience. It was natural leadership. Marcus ran inside. He grabbed every flashlight he had, 4 powerful LED flashlights. He positioned them strategically around the porch, creating illumination. Wolves hate bright light. It wouldn't stop them, but would make them hesitate. He also grabbed fireworks. He'd bought a huge box last 4th of July and never used them. Rockets, firecrackers, flares, all illegal without permit in Alaska, but Marcus didn't care about legality at this moment. The first attack came from the north. 10 wolves emerged from the spruce forest at full speed. Their paws barely touched the snow, grey ghosts moving with lethal grace. Lobo, Phantasma, and Lobo Dos met them 15 meters from the house. The collision was brutal. Lobo, with his 68 kilos and wild wolf blood, hit the group's leader with such force both rolled in the snow. It was wolf against wolf, wild against domesticated. But Lobo had something the wild ones didn't have. He had reason. He had home to protect. His jaws found the wild wolf's neck. He didn't let go. The wolf tried to break free. He couldn't. Phantasma fought 2 wolves simultaneously. Despite his fluffy white fur making him look decorative, Phantasma was a fighter. He'd survived 8 months in a noisy shelter full of other aggressive dogs. He knew how to defend himself. Lobo Dos, the youngest at 3 years, fought with ferocity that had no logic for his size. He'd been pushed from a moving car. He'd survived with a broken leg. He'd learned early that life is brutal and no one saves you except yourself, until Marcus saved him. And now Lobo Dos would return that favor. The eastern attack came 30 seconds later. 10 wolves against Yukon and Denali. The Husky brothers had an advantage. They'd run together for years as sled dogs. They knew each other's movements without looking. When Yukon attacked, Denali defended. When Denali advanced, Yukon covered. They were a 2-part machine, but they were 2 against 10. Math would eventually win. One of the wolves managed to get past their defense. He ran straight toward the house. Yukon turned to intercept, but 4 wolves blocked him. He was trapped. The wolf that escaped jumped toward the porch. Marcus saw him coming. He raised his rifle. He fired. The sound cut through the air like thunder. The bullet hit the wolf in the shoulder. The animal howled and fell. He didn't die, but could no longer run. 11 bullets remaining. The western attack was the most coordinated. 10 wolves didn't run directly. They approached in dispersed formation, testing, looking for weakness. Aurora and Sombra met them near the woodshed 20 meters from the house. Aurora, with her mismatched eyes making her unique, used her speed. She ran in circles around the wolves, distracting them, dividing them. Sombra, the former police dog afraid of gunfire, but not predators, used his tactical training. He positioned himself strategically. He waited for the perfect moment. He attacked with precision, but the wolves were also intelligent. They separated. 5 went after Aurora. 5 after Sombra, and suddenly both were isolated, surrounded, fighting for their lives. Marcus fired from the porch. A bullet hit a wolf attacking Aurora. The animal fell, 10 bullets remaining, but it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. The southern group, the final 10 wolves, advanced toward Tank and Oso. Tank, the Akita with scars from illegal fights, showed no fear. He'd faced worse things than wolves. He'd faced humans who enjoyed hurting him. Hungry wolves were honest at least. They attacked to survive, not for entertainment. Oso, the giant Malamute who had spent years in a cage, fought with fury coming from years of denied freedom. Each bite was for every day spent locked up. Each growl was for every moment stolen from him. Subscribe to the channel because what comes next has never been told. We also want to know what city you're watching from. This isn't fiction. It's a real event documented by the property's security cameras that the Alaska Fish and Wildlife Service studied for months, trying to understand how 9 domestic dogs survived against 40 wild wolves. What you're about to hear changed the way wildlife biologists understand canine loyalty, because that night, in less than 20 minutes, 9 rescued dogs demonstrated something science can't fully measure. That when you give a second chance to those who didn't have one, when you offer home to those who didn't know it, when you love what others discarded, that gratitude becomes something more powerful than instinct. It becomes purpose. And with purpose, impossibilities become possible. The battle continued. Tank in the south had brought down 2 wolves but was bleeding from multiple bites. Oso fought beside him. His dark brown fur was now stained red. But they didn't retreat. In the east, Yukon was wounded. A deep bite on his back leg made him limp. Denali positioned himself over his brother, protecting, willing to die before letting them touch Yukon. The wolves pressed, but something strange was happening. The 9 dogs weren't fighting as individuals. They were fighting as family. When one was in danger, another appeared. When one fell, another took their place. It wasn't training, it was love. In the west, Aurora had received an ugly bite on her side. She bled heavily. Sombra, the dog afraid of gunfire, did something extraordinary. He abandoned his defensible position. He ran directly toward the 5 wolves surrounding Aurora. He threw himself between them and the wounded female. And he growled with such intensity the wolves actually retreated for a second, not from physical fear, but from recognition of something they respect. Absolute will to sacrifice. Marcus saw Aurora fall. He saw dark blood against white snow. He felt something break inside him. These weren't just pets. They were his family, the only family he'd had in 5 years, the only reason he got up every morning with purpose. He ran downstairs. He went out the front door with his rifle. The cold hit him like a physical fist, -22 degrees. His breath froze instantly. He ran west. Toward Aurora and Sombra, he fired twice. 2 wolves fell, 8 bullets remaining. The other wolves in that area saw the human with weapon and retreated momentarily. Marcus knelt beside Aurora. The wounded female looked at him with her blue eye and her brown eye. Those eyes that had made her unsellable. Those eyes Marcus thought were the most beautiful thing he'd seen. She tried to get up. She couldn't. Marcus lifted her, 52 kilos of bleeding dog in his arms. He ran back toward the house. Sombra ran beside him, protecting him. 3 wolves tried to intercept. Marcus fired once. He missed. He fired again. He hit. 6 bullets. A third wolf launched at him. Sombra intercepted him in the air. Both animals rolled in the snow. Sombra was smaller but was ex-police. He knew where to bite. His jaws found the wolf's throat. He squeezed. The wolf stopped moving. Marcus reached the porch. He put Aurora inside the house on a blanket. She was bleeding but alive. Her tail moved weakly when he touched her, as if telling him it's okay, you did what you could, I love you anyway. Outside, the battle reached its critical point. Lobo in the north had killed 2 wolves but was exhausted. Phantasma had a torn ear. Lobo Dos limped from his previously broken leg that had been re-injured. In the south, Tank finally fell. Too many wounds, too much blood loss. He collapsed in the snow. Oso stood over him. The giant Malamute growled with such ferocity, the 8 remaining wolves in the south stopped. Because they saw something in Oso's eyes. They saw he was no longer the dog who lived in a cage. He was the dog who had discovered freedom. And he'd die before being caged again. He'd die before letting them hurt his pack. Marcus grabbed the fireworks box. He ran outside again. He lit 6 rockets simultaneously. He launched them in different directions. They exploded in the air with detonations that sounded like bombs. Bright lights, deafening sounds. The wolves, scared by sound and lights, retreated instinctively. They didn't flee, but they hesitated, and that hesitation was enough. The 9 dogs took advantage of the confusion. Yukon and Denali, despite their wounds, attacked. In 5 seconds, 3 more wolves fell. Lobo and Phantasma pressed their advantage in the north. 2 more wolves dead. Sombra, protecting the door where Aurora was, killed another trying to enter. Marcus fired his last 5 bullets. 3 hit, 2 missed. 0 bullets remaining. But it didn't matter anymore, because something had changed on the battlefield. The 40 wolves had arrived desperate and hungry, but they hadn't expected to find resistance like this. They'd expected to find weak human with maybe a couple lazy domestic dogs. Instead, they found 9 warriors, 9 dogs who knew suffering, who knew loss, who knew what it was to have nothing and then finally have something worth protecting. And that difference, that motivation coming not from instinct but from gratitude, had changed everything. The pack's alpha wolf, a massive grey male weighing 55 kilos, finally appeared. He'd been watching from distance, evaluating, calculating. He was old. He had scars telling stories of decades of survival. He'd led this merged super pack for 3 months of the most brutal winter in 40 years. He'd lost 15 wolves in this battle, 15 of 40. He looked at Lobo, leader to leader, alpha to alpha. And in that silent exchange there was understanding, respect, recognition that both fought for the same thing, survival, family, home. The alpha wolf howled, not a howl of attack, a howl of retreat. The 25 remaining wolves heard their leader. They began to retreat, slowly at first, then faster, not in panic, with dignity, dragging their wounded when they could, leaving their dead when they couldn't. They'd hunt again, but not here, not tonight. Not against these 9. When the last wolf disappeared into the forest, silence fell again. But it was a different silence. It wasn't the unnatural silence from before. It was the silence of exhaustion, of relief, of having survived the impossible. Marcus collapsed in the snow. His hands shook uncontrollably. He looked around. Tank was unconscious, but breathing. Oso stood beside him, covered in blood. Yukon and Denali limped toward each other, brothers who had saved each other. Aurora was inside, bleeding but alive. Sombra had deep cuts but was standing. Lobo, Phantasma, and Lobo Dos were exhausted, wounded, but alive. All 9 were alive. All 9 had survived. Against 40 wolves, against impossible math, against all logic. Marcus began to cry. He didn't cry when he lost his company. He didn't cry when his wife left. He didn't cry when his daughters stopped talking to him. But now he cried. Because these 9 dogs no one had wanted, these 9 dogs society had discarded as broken or old or problematic, had just risked their lives for him. Not because he was perfect, but because he'd been imperfect enough to see them when they were invisible. Damaged enough to recognize damage in them, broken enough to know how to heal by being healed. Lobo walked to Marcus. The giant hybrid put his head in the man's lap. Marcus hugged him. His fur was wet with snow and blood, but he was warm. He was alive. They were all alive. The following days were of recovery. Marcus called the Fairbanks emergency veterinarian using a satellite phone borrowed from a neighbor who came after seeing the fireworks lights. The vet arrived by helicopter 6 hours later. He examined all 9 dogs. Tank had 18 wounds requiring stitches. Oso had 3 fractured ribs. Yukon had severe leg damage requiring months of rehabilitation. Denali was exhausted but without major injuries. Aurora had lost much blood but would survive. Sombra had deep bites but nothing vital compromised. Lobo had a partially torn ear. Phantasma was better than expected. Lobo Dos had rebroken his previously injured leg and would need surgery again. The vet said it was a miracle. Marcus said it wasn't miracle. It was loyalty. It was gratitude. It was love converted into action. The Alaska Fish and Wildlife Service sent a team 3 days later to investigate. They found 15 dead wolves on Marcus's property, all with wounds consistent with large dog attacks. They tracked the remaining pack. The 25 surviving wolves had divided again into their original groups and had migrated 120 kilometers west, looking for better hunting territories. The lead biologist, a man named Dr. Robert Chen, who had studied wolves for 30 years, asked Marcus permission to review the security cameras. Marcus had completely forgotten about them, but yes, he had 8 cameras around the property. All had recorded the battle. Dr. Chen spent 2 weeks analyzing the footage. Then he wrote an article for the Journal of Wildlife Management titled Exceptional Cooperative Behavior in Rescued Domestic Canines, a Case Study. The article documented how 9 dogs without formal training, without genetic relation, rescued from abuse or abandonment situations, had demonstrated levels of cooperation and sacrifice rivaling or exceeding what's observed in highly organized wild wolf packs. Dr. Chen theorized that shared experience of trauma and rescue had created bonds simple genetics or training couldn't explain. That when individuals who have known abandonment finally find belonging, they protect that belonging with intensity transcending instinct and entering the territory of conscious choice. The article was cited in various media. National Geographic wanted to make a documentary. Marcus declined. This wasn't about fame, it was about family. 3 months later, in April, when snow finally began to melt, Marcus walked along the northern boundary of his property. There, at the forest's edge, he found wolf tracks, fresh from the night before, but they didn't cross toward his property. They only bordered, as if they were checking, remembering, and then they moved away. Marcus smiled. The wolves had learned, not with resentment but with respect. Sometimes the best victory isn't destroying your opponent. It's teaching them there are places where the cost of fighting is too high, that there are territories defended by something stronger than teeth or claws, defended by loyalty earned through kindness. That night, Marcus sat on his porch with the 9 dogs at his feet. Aurora had recovered her energy. Tank had new scars adding to his collection. Yukon limped but could run again. All 9 were there, alive, together. He looked at the stars shining in Alaska's sky, brighter here than in any city where he'd lived, and he thought about how life takes you down strange paths, how he'd come to Alaska fleeing from failures, looking for distance from mistakes he couldn't undo, thinking he was broken, too late to matter, too damaged to be loved, too old to start over. And these 9 dogs, these 9 rejects no one else wanted, had taught him something 58 years hadn't taught him, that you're not broken just because others didn't know how to love you, that it's not too late as long as you still breathe, that age is just a number, and damage is just a scar, and scars are just maps of battles you survived, that sometimes discarded things are most valuable, that imperfect can be perfect when you find who appreciates imperfections. That family isn't about blood or perfection, it's about showing up when it matters, about staying when it's hard, about fighting for who fought for you. Lobo put his head in Marcus's lap, the 68-kilo hybrid who had been chained and forgotten, who now slept in a warm bed and ate twice a day and ran free on 200 acres. whose eyes still carried something wild, but whose heart had chosen domestication. Because domestication isn't weakness, it's choice. It's saying I could leave, but I choose to stay. Because this place, this person, this family is worth more than freedom without purpose. Aurora, with her mismatched eyes, lay down beside Lobo. Tank, with all his scars, stretched at their feet. Oso and Sombra flanked Marcus like guards. Yukon and Denali slept against each other as always. Phantasma the White and Lobo Dos the Grey completed the circle. 9 dogs, 9 stories of abandonment that became one story of family. Marcus closed his eyes. For the first time in 5 years, he felt something he hadn't felt since leaving San Francisco. He felt he belonged, not because he'd built a $3 million mansion, but because he'd built something money can't buy: home. And in the distance, from the forest, a solitary howl cut through the night, not threatening, almost respectful, like acknowledgement, as if the wolves were singing not about lost territory, but about worthy opponents found. And on the porch, Lobo raised his head. He listened, but he didn't respond. He didn't need to. The message had been delivered and received. This place is protected. This family is unbreakable, not with guns or money or walls, but with something older and more powerful. With absolute certainty that when you rescue who no one else wanted, when you give home to who didn't know it, when you show love to who only knew discard, that gratitude becomes loyalty, and that loyalty becomes shield, and that shield becomes impenetrable. Because 9 dogs against 40 wolves is mathematically impossible. But math can't measure gratitude. It can't quantify love. It can't calculate the power of finally belonging after years of being lost. And when you have that, when you truly have it, numbers stop mattering. Odds become irrelevant. The impossible becomes inevitable. That night, January 15th, 2023, at 11:47 p.m., in an isolated mansion 40 kilometers north of Denali, Alaska, 9 stray dogs demonstrated something science is still trying to fully understand: that sometimes the discarded are most valuable, the broken are strongest, and those no one wanted are the ones who most fiercely protect the little they finally have. Marcus Ashford had come to Alaska looking for redemption. He found something better. He found purpose, and that purpose had 4 legs and tail that wagged every time he entered the room. 9 purposes, 9 reasons to get up every morning, 9 reminders that it's never too late to start over, never too late to matter, never too late to be loved. To this day, when there's a full moon, inhabitants of the Denali region swear they can see 10 figures patrolling the perimeter of an isolated mansion. A man and 9 dogs, walking together in the snow, protecting something that can't be bought, can't be stolen, only earned, 1 inch at a time, 1 act of kindness at a time, 1 rescued dog at a time. Home. Subscribe to this channel, because every story we share here comes from the heart of someone who has dedicated their entire life to studying and honoring these extraordinary animals. I'd also love to know what city and country you're watching from. At 65 years old, every comment I read reminds me why I keep doing this. And if these stories of loyalty and sacrifice have touched your soul like they touch mine every time I research them, consider leaving a super thanks. That help, however small it may seem, allows me to keep traveling, researching, and bringing these real stories the world needs to hear. Stories that remind us true loyalty still exists, that heroism doesn't always have 2 legs, and that sometimes the best life teachers have 4 legs and don't say a single word. Now yes, let's continue with this story that changed my perspective forever.